Good morning. Martha, get ready. You're my first one up on the queue today.
That's never good.
Of course it is. All right. So welcome to another live role-playing session. And it was interesting. I was on Chris Smith's conversion code. Chris has been asking me for 2.5 years to go on something. So I finally said yes. And it was the first time I've ever actually talked to people outside of like this ecosystem, right? And it's mind blowing just to see actually how much further ahead we are than everyone else. Like even some of the most basic concepts and just hearing how people talk, it's kind of frightening, right? So, as August now 17th approaches, not August 23rd, we want to make sure that we have confidence in having these conversations, right? And confidence comes from the repetition of action, right? You do something over and over again, you feel good about it, right? So think about this. If I asked you to walk down the street from one block to another in New York City, and I say you get paid from it, you'd be like, okay, great. Like you could hand me a check now. Like I feel good about doing it. And the goal is to feel that confident about having these kinds of sales conversations, right? And don't confuse it. It is sales, right? Like you are trying to get somebody to engage with you for a service that they're going to pay you for, right? So today's Sellers Day, and we could talk about whether it's listings or buyers. But the question is like, where's the gap? And Martha, what do you think, based on your accountability sessions, are some of the more pressing conversations that people should practice?
I think talking about the buyer agency fee, sellers are very aware of it, at least in my area, and they're bringing it up even if we don't. So
So a thoughtful way.
can I clarify that just a little bit? I
Yeah.
think what's really important for us is to be able to show them the value of why they want to offer it, because otherwise they just look at it as more money coming out of their pocket. They have to understand why it's of value to them.
Okay. So step number one, creating the gap. Does anyone know what that is?
The gap between perceived and actualized value.
Bingo. I love you. So look, if somebody says, why do I have to pay somebody? Do you know what they're telling you?
They see it as an expense and not a value.
Say that one more time, Martha.
They see it as an expense and not a value.
Bingo, right? They're literally raising their hand and saying, like, I don't understand why I should invest this much money for this service. That's what they're telling me. Look, and I need all of us to really dial in on this, right? Like you have to, what I'm sharing with you is just a framework of thinking. So somebody says to you, why do I have to pay somebody? You know what the first thing is that you tell them? Anyone want to guess?
You
Deborah,
don't.
I think you know.
You don't need to.
You don't need to. Exactly. And what do most people normally do?
They do what's best for them.
No. What do most agents do? Let me clarify that.
Oh.
Defend our commission.
They defend. They go, well, you need a buyer. So creating the gap is a sales technique which creates a gap, right, of where the person is and where they want to go, that you can actually sell to the gap. Like the buyer's agent fills the gap. If they don't know what a buyer's agent does, then there is no gap to fill. And remember the fifth key of effective conversations: no telling, no explaining. So do you think telling and explaining somebody in a literally like Hamlet style monologue is going to get somebody to invest that kind of money? No, not at all. So the first step is you don't. Then the next step is, would it be okay if I asked you a question? And they're going to say, sure. Do you know what the question you're going to ask them is? Where are you moving to? Right? Or if you did the Med C, you're going to say, hey, you'd shared with us that you were going to Florida and you're excited about this, correct? And they're going to say, yes. How are you finding your next home? And what do you think they're going to say? Anybody?
They're working with
Well,
an agent.
online,
They're working with an agent, right? The amount of buyers that go unrepresented are like this. And you're going to say, great. You're not going to go in there. Now, this part that I'm going to show you here is how you create the gap. So I understand. Well, you could have, I would say to Brian, I'd say, hey, Brian, I'm like, that's great to hear. And you could have 100% just looked for a property on your own. What did you envision the agent doing for you that you felt you couldn't do yourself? Remember that question we asked buyers? You can ask the seller the same question. Brian, now play along. What would you say?
Well, I don't know the neighborhood like they do in the, I mean, I got a general idea of where I want to move in these locations, but I think they could really help me focus in on that particular market since it's, I mean, I don't live there yet.
Got it. So, and what about, I'm gonna say it's great. So you want them to focus and share their local market expertise. What specifically about someone knowing the market is most important to you inside and outside of the home?
What specifically about knowing the market inside and out is important to me? Well, I guess
Inside the home and outside the home, right? The home as well as the lifestyle of a new area you're moving to.
so I can find what I need for myself and for my family in the least amount of time possible that best matches my criteria and my budget.
Got it. And that totally makes sense. And outside of that, what else, is there anything else that you're counting on the agent to do for you?
Well, help guide me through the buying process in that state that I'm moving to, because maybe it's different than here in New York.
Got it. And, you know, given that you do have a full-time job and if you're buying in the same market, do you find it would be a good investment of your time to also do those same things for yourself and get the same?
No, I'm too busy for that.
Got it. And the other question I have for you is, how important is your timeline in terms of, you know, you'd mentioned that you're selling and you're moving, right? Notice I didn't say selling and buying. You're selling and moving. Like if something were to go wrong or mismanaging that, what kind of problem would that cause for you?
It'd be a huge problem. I mean, I need to get into a neighborhood where I can get my kids registered for school for the next year. And if that doesn't happen in a timely fashion, that's going to be a real problem for me and my family in getting things set up.
Pause. Is this a very realistic scenario? Yes or no? Raise your hand if you have a yes. All right. Does anyone see what I just did here? Someone want to unmute themselves and tell me. Brian, it can't be you.
you just ask questions.
But what did I do in asking these questions?
You had him explain the gap and what his motivation is so that he can see the value and why it benefits him to have a buyer's agent involved. Because you can have a bigger buyer pool, you can have a smoother transaction.
What I actually did, right? Those are some of, like, I would say the secondary benefits, right? What I did was subconsciously program his brain in his own words on A, what the value of an agent is, and B, what can go wrong for him if he doesn't have an agent. He just doesn't know that yet, right? There's a clear gap here. Clear. And this was this a difficult conversation to have with anybody? And realistically, for all the people that their brains just go to all the crazy stuff that could go wrong, how many people really are going to tell you, well, I'm not using an agent? Right? then that becomes a different conversation, right? Because if they're not using an agent, the likelihood of them paying another agent for their property is what? Nothing. I'm going to have to create a new gap for him, right? And we'll get to that one next. So now I would say, I'm going to say, Brian, I'm going to say, this is going to sound like, Brian, are you aware of exactly what an agent does for the compensation they receive?
I've got some idea, I think.
Would it be okay if I just shared something for you, just for you to look over?
Sure.
So Brian, I apologize in advance. This is so many like minor details, and this is just the way that we work with clients. It's representative in general, maybe or maybe not the same detail or additional details as everyone else. But just take a look at this and let me know how you feel and what you think. Now, I'm going to hand him my internal buyer checklist. You can go to realtor.com and look at the 101 things an agent does and like repurpose that checklist, use your own checklist. And when they look at that checklist, you're just going to sit there in silence and let them read it. Right. And what I would encourage you to is really overemphasize the contract close, right? After a property gets into contract, I put weekly check-in, coordinate movers, do this thing, do this thing, do this thing, all those little things that you do, right? And then I'm going to say to him, let me ask you a question. Do you feel, or do you think, depending on the person, right? If it's a more financial person, think. If it's a more emotional person, feel. Right? Do you either think or feel, Brian, that if a person was doing this on their own, they'd have the same likelihood of adhering to the timeline we agree upon and having it be as smooth as possible transaction? Because things always are going to happen not according to plan. Notice how I said that? I want to let him know upfront things are always going to happen, right? Because they are. There's no such thing as a fast and easy closing, even when you're buying cash. Right. And then he's going to stop and say no. Right. So I'm going to say, look, what you should consider is not only is the buyer's agent's commission a sales incentive to get people to come to your home, but it's also something that potentially ensures, I can't guarantee it, right? I'm not going to say, because we know that agents suck, right? We're going to say not all agents are the same, but I think we can agree that the likelihood of having professional representation can ensure that it's a lot more likely than if not that the transaction makes it to the closing with as little problems as possible. And what do you think he's going to say?
That makes sense to me.
All right. Questions, comments, concerns? All right, great. Now, who are two people that want to role play? You know what? I have Brian and Martha here, so I'm just going to pin you two. Spotlight one. All right. So, Martha, you can be the agent.
Boy, okay, thank you.
I have confidence in you. And Brian was a good, realistic seller that's not the seller from hell. By the way, I just want to say this to you very clearly, right? If you have people that do not want to answer these questions and are resistant, combative, there's a saying I like to live by: how it starts is how it goes. If they don't want to answer and be in dialogue and collaborative with you, don't work with them. It's not going to be a good experience. All right, go ahead.
So start right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Brian. Thanks for meeting with me today.
Nice to meet you, Martha.
You
Thanks
too.
for coming by.
You're welcome. If it's okay with you, I'd like to start by asking you some key questions so that I can know what's most important to you and we can focus solely on that. Does that
Shoot.
sound
Wait, hold on. Get
Okay.
to the place. Sorry, this is my fault. Get to the place where you say, Brian's just going to start off by saying, like, I don't know if I want to offer out a commission or why do I have to offer a commission? We're going to literally start there. So you can make up, Martha, you could just say that he's moving to Florida and his motivation is to save on state taxes because he's in New York.
Okay. So Brian, tell me a little bit about your move to Florida and how you're doing that. Why,
No,
who's
wait,
helping
wait.
you or what?
We're assuming you've gone through all this and you have the information. Brian is going to start this off by saying, why do I have to pay a buyer's agent's commission, which is the concern
Okay,
that you
all
had
right.
shared.
Okay.
So, Martha, I just saw the headlines that we don't have to pay buyer's agents commissions anymore, and I'm really excited about that because does that mean it's gonna cost me half of what it used to cost to sell my home?
So you're right, Brian, you don't. Would you be surprised if I told you that you never had to? Would it be okay if I ask you a question?
No, I guess I would be surprised if I heard I never had to. Is that why the lawsuit happened? Because you guys were overcharging us?
Well, I'm not sure I can go into depth about exactly why each lawsuit happened, but I can tell you that the commission has always been negotiable and you've never had to offer a buyer agent commission.
Okay,
But would it be okay if I asked you a question?
yeah, sure.
So I know that you're moving to Florida, and how are you finding your new property in Florida?
Um, well, my wife's been doing a lot of the looking online so far, and I guess she talked to a couple of brokers down there. I don't know if they're representing the properties or they're on the buy side, but I suppose eventually when we go, we're going to want to engage somebody to take us on a tour.
That makes sense. And what do you envision that agent doing for you that you wouldn't do for yourself?
Well, I'm imagining they're going to talk to me and understand what we're looking for and our needs, and put together a list of properties for a tour that match that criteria.
Okay, and maybe know someone that can show you the area?
Yeah, sure. I
Sure.
mean,
Like,
we don't know. We know generally where we want to go, like, or around between Tampa and Sarasota, but I don't know.
the specific.
I don't know what's what each area has yet. Where it's a big move.
Sure, that makes sense. So tell me a little bit about your timeline and why that's important to you.
Well, we'd ideally like to get settle in a home by May or June, so we can get the kids registered for school for the fall and get them set up with activities and everything. So we don't have to scramble to do that at the mid to end of summer.
Right. So getting the kids in school in a timely fashion is important. Tell me a little bit about the problem that would cause for you if that didn't happen in a timely fashion.
I don't know. Do you have kids?
Well, my kids are grown.
Oh,
Yes.
well, at my kids' age, that would be a nightmare because they're all in sports. They're all have busy social schedules that
Sure.
if we don't plan these things out and it doesn't happen in a timely manner, they're going to miss the deadlines to get on teams, to get on all kinds of things.
Yeah, I remember those days. Let me share this checklist with you, if I may, that shows some of the responsibilities that a buyer's agent has and what they bring to the transaction and how they
Okay.
help you sell your home. Okay. Do you feel that if a person was doing this on their own and not represented by a buyer, that they would be able to have a smoothest transaction when the inevitable issues arise? Or do you think that it might be more beneficial to have a buyer's agent involved who's been through this multiple times that can help hold the deal together?
Well, I mean, this is a lot, but I mean, if they want to do it on their own, I mean, won't you be handling to make sure that the transaction goes smoothly for me?
Well, if I did that, I would be in a dual agency position, which I have to deviate a little bit from maybe Chirag, what you want me to say, but it's the only thing I'm comfortable with. I have a business practice that I do not do dual agency, so I would not be representing them. Okay,
Ready?
sorry.
I'm going to reframe that, right? One of the ways that we choose to support our clients is by only representing them in the transaction. Meaning we believe the investment that a person selling their home makes in an agent is a significant one. So at no point will we work with another party because we feel that as other agents may or may not do that, for us, it's a conflict of interest because you've already confided in us, trust, loyalty, and we plan on only engaging on your behalf throughout the transaction. And then I turn around to Brian and say, if I did that, are you aware of the changes and the impact that that would have in our relationship and our ability to advise you.
Oh, well, no, I wasn't aware of that. I don't, no, I want you representing me. I don't want you, working for two parties at the same time.
And remember, whatever you do, Brian, I support you 100% here. Take a look at this, and I would highlight the, seller's agent, the dual agent. I'm in New York, so I know our disclosures really well. When you read the dual agency thing in New York, you would never want a dual agent, right? Like, it's like, and then you literally, if you want to drive the hammer in right here, like the drop the mic moment. Like, let me ask you a question. We agreed your home's going to list around $1 million, Brian, right? How would you feel if you spent $30,000 on a service and when you needed them the most, it couldn't really give you editorial advice? Like,
No, I'd be pissed.
Exactly. By the way, this is my opportunity again to say how stupid this whole lawsuit is, and that literally exactly what they're saying is agents are steering people to properties with the highest commission. What do you think you're creating in this? People are going to have to look for properties based on commission because not everyone's going to have the money to pay. The incentives are different. It's like, but do you all see how smooth Martha was? Right? Great job, Martha. I give you a 9. I give you a 10, but that would, in Robert's words, it implies that there's no room for improvement. He says, Shrug, there's never a 10. Brian, how did that feel for you on your end?
It was good. She took me through the process, asked me, the important questions to help me come to the conclusion that buyers agents are necessary as a part of the transaction and are worth something.
Brian, you did a great job of being so too. Martha,
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well, Brian,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So if the seller asks you, what do you do with the direct buyer when they come? Martha, you said that you don't represent the other party, but like you can't just say, okay, I don't want to work with buyers who are not represented by anyone. Like, what exactly is the language?
Great. What I would do is I would let that buyer know that I represent the seller in a transaction, and I would refer them to either somebody else on my team or a colleague in my office, or ultimately tell them they have the opportunity to find any agent they want. Right. Like that's, and then I would advise them I would advise them first, I would try to refer them to somebody I knew, right? So I could at least work with a collaborative colleague. If they're like, no, I want to find my own agent, right? Great. Now, I would say, here are the things that you want to look for in an agent to get somebody that's qualified. Now, for the lovely state of Florida and transactional states that have broker agency, what I would explain to somebody is, like, you guys have that end-to-end checklist for sellers. You're going to say the percentage that I charge you is for these services on your side of the transaction. Right? So I would say, imagine going to a dentist. You're going to get 3 cavities fixed. And now all of a sudden they find a root canal that they can fix that day, but that is outside of the scope of services. So if I had to represent both parties in the transaction, there'd be an additional fee. And my suggestion is I would discount that original additional fee outside, right? So some people have, in a 6% state, people say, well, if I'm representing both parties, it'll be 4% or 5%, right? Like whatever it is, give them a discount and represent both parties then.
Okay, I have another question. So we're just described to the seller what the buyer's agents do. And the next question we can get is like, okay, if this is everything that the buyer agent does to the buyer, why would I have to pay to the buyer's agent? And like, especially 3%, right? So we would have to go back to that script that is like about the buyer's commission incentives, or like.
Yeah. Well, you number one, I commend you because you're thinking about this the right way, right? You're like, what Oksana has done is she's pieced multiple parts of what we did together, right? So then I would get the person. So, okay, so we're in agreement that it is a value to you, not to me, to you, to have a buyer have some sort of, to have professional representation, correct?
Yeah,
So-
pay for it, yeah.
The next thing that we have to align on is what is the incentive that we're going to offer? So my suggestion is let's go and look at what your competition is offering. Now, the way that I suggest thinking about this, imagine if it was a woman, I would say, like this is where you have to be really good at scanning the room, right? Like if the primary decision maker is a woman, look around at something that she's invested in that's like higher end, whether it's car, clothes, shoes, bags, or whatever it is, right? If it's a guy, you could say cars, if they like cars, or a suit, if they're wearing a suit, something they can relate to. And say, if you're buying a car, right? And Lamborghini had no sales incentive or had no discount or no sales incentive. Maserati had a 10% discount or 10% sales incentive, and Bentley had a 30% discount or sales incentive. Which one would you go to and why? That's the talk track, right? So a lot of this is framing. Like when you use the dentist, that makes sense, right? If you go to an attorney, they'll give you a scope of work that they're doing, but if it becomes something outside of that, they charge you. It's like if a cleaning person comes to your house and they think they're just doing a routine cleaning and you just do a party, they're gonna be like, this is a deep clean and it's a different fee, right? It's outside of what you agreed upon. But again, now when you start thinking about this as an actual profession, this goes back and what you're gonna turn around and tell the people is that, look, this is what I charge for the services that I offer in representing you in the transaction. Does that make sense?
Chirag, can I ask a question?
I love questions. Keep them
So
coming.
you just, and one of the things you just said was, let me show you what other people are paying for the fee or for the compensation.
Let's review the incentives your competition is offering for an agent to bring a buyer to your home.
So where are we going to be able to find that now? Because it won't be in our MLS.
They're going to be, so Bright MLS, which is the second largest MLS in the country, just put in there that there'll be a field that says seller concession, yes or no, and as well as with the seller concession. So that's going to become essentially the workaround, right? And the other part is like, look, this is the information that we have, and I'll have to go in and make conversations, right? I will have to go and reach out to people as well proactively. And this is something that we can figure out what works best for you. And I support you 100%. I don't know, Ian, what's going to be on brokerage sites and how this is all going to work. For private exclusives, it's our own internal database. So I would imagine that the stuff would be there, but Compass has not released yet any national comms around this. But knowing Compass, they're literally going to wait to see what everybody else does, see the mistakes that they make, analyze the data, and probably a week to 10 days before make a decision. You notice that even with the settlement, like they waited for these things to happen, and then they made an incredible settlement, which was hundreds of millions of dollars less than if they just jumped on the bandwagon with everybody else based on their weird formula. Yeah. I don't know the MLSs have not shared anything. NAR sent an email out recently talking about how some of these things will work. They don't know what they're doing. You got to remember, this is new to everybody. And like the government keeps like moving the ball and the settlements and things like that. So if I thought this episode was over and we could just go to the next season, I'd be lying. There's still more episodes left, and there's still some cliffhangers and stuff. And honestly, in my opinion, none of the stuff they're doing makes any logical sense. But the most important thing is to be equipped with these conversations. So what I want you to do is, you see how you have these sheets here, right? I want everyone needs to, if you're in Chirag Shah Coaching, you need to go buy a large thing of Post-it notes like this. It's like imperative, right? Because what I want to teach you not only is the skill of what you do, is the skill of how to think. So this is called conversation mapping, right? You're going to say, I don't want to pay a commission. Then where do you go? Then where do you go? Then where do you go? Right? So it's like, create the value of the buyer's agent. Great, but then why do I have to pay him 3%? That's another one. I don't want to pay a buyer's agent's commission. That's another thing. So then you start visually seeing how you're playing chess, right? If you're just reacting what somebody's saying, you're just playing checkers. So then you'll know there's only so many determined outcomes that come out of this. I don't want to pay a commission at all is one. Number two, it is, why do I have to pay that much commission? Number three, this completely makes sense. I'll just pay, you know, whatever it is you recommend. That's it. So if you're telling me in the next 60 days, you can't figure out like 360, no, hold on. Say June, yeah, June, July. Yeah, we have like 60 plus 17, 77-ish days, say 80 to round up. In the next 80 days, you should be able to figure out how to have 3 great talk tracks for people. 3. This is the, if you're working with listings, this is the single most important thing to focus on.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, shoot.
So we just played this like role in the person meeting. What if you're on the phone with a buyer, like, and they can ask you, can you, like, should I email the list of what the buyer's agent does? Because like, how do I frame that particular conversation on the phone with what buyer's agents do?
Yeah, explain the thing is,
If I
would say,
can't really show it.
I would, number one, if someone wants to just know about costs up front, they're price shopping, right? So I would turn around to you and I would say, that's really great. I would say, is this one of the largest or the largest financial purchase that you're going to make today and in your lifetime? Oh no, it's the largest. Great. So then without even thinking, you could understand how important it is to actually sit down and have a conversation, because, you know, we have to make sure that the service we offer is in alignment with what your expectations are. When would be a good time to come in? I'm not answering any of this stuff over the phone. Anyone that says, oh, send me an email, look at it. That's not how you hire somebody. If you're going to hire an attorney to go to court or go to a doctor, you're not going to do this stuff over the phone. So people that do these things are major red flags, major red flags. I'd say, you know what, like, so it sounds like the cost, right, is more important than the investment, right? The cost actually is what happens if you don't have the right representation. That's the real cost. Oh, I loved it. I honestly have to say this is like my favorite session. I could do role playing and these things like all day long, all day. There's nothing you have that I don't have a thoughtful answer for. So look, come back at 12:30, sit in on as many of these role playing conversations and then just practice. Do you think that there's going to be a big pool of agents that could answer this in the same way that you just did? No. Because I have not heard, and I've been tracking what all the other coaches are doing, right? I've not heard anyone say anything like this. Like, this is our own original stuff. They're only allowed to charge. I have no idea. You're all self-employed. Companies can't dictate what you charge for an independent service. And this is all like, they're saying 2.5% because they think 3% is taboo. But the last time I checked, it's your business. If you want to work for 1%, 3% with a buyer, that's your choice. Over 0.5%, are you, I would literally go to them. Great. So I understand you only want to invest 2.5%. So let me ask you a question. Are you only looking for opportunities that are on the market that everyone's competing over? No. Well, can I share the benefits of working with us and what your investment would get you? I'd start talking about private exclusives, the agent network, how likely to sells are literally potential buyers that no one else has access to. I would show them the likely to sells and be like, you know, my 29,000 plus colleagues all have this. So Compass in reality has the largest database of off-market properties out of any brokerage in America. Yeah, I know that guy from, what the heck is that guy's name? I can't remember his name now. He messages me all the time on Instagram, the guy who owns One Sotheby's, trying to get me to work with him. And then one day randomly, I was in LA and Kate Bauer and I had presented there. This was like, I think 2 summers ago. And randomly we went for a hike and we saw the guy. He's like, Chirag. I'm like, who the hell is this? I'm on like a mountain in LA somewhere. And he's like, hey, I'm the guy from Sotheby's. It's like, this must be fate. It's a sign that we're going to work together. I'm like, dude, I'm never working with you. And like, you just see the look on his like wife's face. He's like, see, everyone doesn't say yes to it. I was like, there's no amount of money you could give me to get me to work with you there. Nobody. It's not happening. Right? So take this information, understand the strategic advantage, and do not stop practicing. Right? So come on at 11:30. We're going to start talking about a little more advanced use of the Med C. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to role play this again at 12:30. And for anyone that has teams and friends in this community, highly encourage them to attend these sessions. Martha, when you're in your accountability groups, like really push the value of coming here. If not, these people are missing easy reps that they could have every week. All right, everybody. Love in my heart. I love you all. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.